Well, we are celebrating 25 years of the JCP this year. Who knows what the JCP is, since that's the title of my talk? What's up with the JCP? I didn't design that title. That's what I was told was going to be my title. So I'm going to tell you what's up with the JCP. But good to know first, who knows of the JCP, which most of you don't know of it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it is and some of the things that we've been talking about over the last few months. And my name is Heather VanCura. I am the director and chairperson of the JCP. So I am, as you might say, the expert on what it is. I started working at Sun Microsystems on the JCP, funnily enough, over 2 decades ago. How time has flown. I was even saying that I was here in this very room in 2016 when we did a hack day, the summer of 2016, before we released Java 9. Now we're already up to Java 22, almost ready to have Java 23. So the reason that I say that time flies for me is really because my job allows me to meet so many of you in my day-to-day work. And I don't do as much of it anymore, but I have been able to travel all over the world, meeting Java developers in their Java user groups. We have almost 400 Java user groups all around the world, and it's always so interesting to me to have a chance to talk with you and find out some of the things that you work on and some of the challenges that you have, and then also learn what's different and what's similar between all of us in every different part of the world. So I do run the JCP. I do work for Oracle as well, so some things I might say about the Java releases are forward-looking statements. But one of the things that I think has remained the same with Java over the years, and what is super unique about the JCP, is that in the JCP, the Java community process, which I'll tell you more about, we work together, and working together, we achieve more. And that translates to the broader Java community at large, but also for all of you here in your local Atlanta Java user group community and in your companies. So things that I'll tell you about are things that you can do to improve your career, to improve your status as an expert, and improve your local community. And then, of course, create a space for you in the global, worldwide Java community. Or here in your own communities, like Vincent and Pratik were saying, right? You have DevNexus here, which is a great opportunity for you to be a leader in your local community. So this year, we're celebrating 25 years of the JCP program, and we're actually now, as of, I think it's today, no, Thursday, Java will be 29. Next year will be the 30-year anniversary of Java, and Java continues to be the most important developer choice and platform, most in demand for jobs. Even though none of you raised your hand that you're hiring, Java continues to be one of the most highly sought after technical skills, as well as the most highly paid technical skill. Who in here is still learning Java? Most of you, I think, are already Java developers, but some of you are just learning it. So great tool to add to your toolbox because it's a highly paid and in-demand skill. And the ecosystem has never been richer, as well as our innovation pipeline has never been richer. And that is a result of some of the new features and innovations that we've been able to bring into the platform through some of the changes that we've done in the JCP program, with, as I mentioned, Java 22 being available now. And the part of the ecosystem is the Java community process. It is also Java user groups. It's also Java champions, who I know we have some Java champions in the audience. A couple of them at least, Vincent and Pratik. So we have those, and we also continue to see that people are certified on Java, running Java on their cloud platforms and developing applications for the cloud. As Java has evolved, it's changed from being something that was targeted at a lot of smaller devices. Now we've really focused on Java SE, the Java SE platform, and ensuring that it is the platform of choice for cloud environments and for you as developers to build applications for deployment in the cloud. So the JCP as an organization, this is the first part of what I told you I would tell you about, is overseeing the platform specification of the Java platform. So it is ensuring that you have a well-specified platform to develop on. That is one of the reasons why Java is documented so well is that it is required of the JCP organization. We require that all versions of the platform be specified. So we have a full specification, we have a reference implementation, and we have the test suite. So a lot of the foundations of the JCP really ensure that we have a wide choice in the ecosystem of implementations of the Java platform, but also a thoroughly specified platform specification and reference implementations. So I am the chair of the organization, and there's an executive committee. So everything that goes into the platform has to be voted on and approved by the executive committee, which the Atlanta JUG is a member of the JCP. So that means every year you have a chance to vote for who's going to be on the executive committee. So the executive committee helps to guide the evolution of the platform itself, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the other topics that we discuss with the executive committee in cooperation with my team that helps to run the organization. But the bulk of the work in the JCP is done by the community itself. So we have different roles in the community. We have specification leads. So specification leads are the leaders of the projects. Then we have expert group members, and we have community members who are contributors. And you, as the Atlanta JUG, are a partner member, and you can contribute to the work of the JCP. So we have corporations who are members, nonprofits and open source groups who are members, Java user groups, as well as individual Java developers. And the bulk of the membership of the JCP is made up of passionate individual developers. While we do have over 200 companies who are members of the JCP, the primary source of our membership is the individual Java developer, and we have over 100 Java user groups all around the world who are also our partner members and helping us to carry forward and make sure that we're representing the needs of all of you who are Java user group members. So I mentioned the things that happen in the JCP. I mentioned that there's spec leads. I mentioned that there's a specification, a reference implementation, and a technology compatibility kit. So these are some of the terms that we discuss in the JCP. The work of the JCP, the projects themselves are actually called Java Specification Requests, or JSRs. All of you, most of you, I'm sure, maybe raise a hand. Have you heard the term JSR? Right, so the things that you're referring to often in your work, it's actually a JSR. So that's what the JCP term is for a project. So every project in the JCP gets a JSR number. We have close to 400 JSRs now that have been evolved over the 25-year history. Every JSR has a spec lead, every JSR has an expert group, and the spec lead working together with the expert group has to deliver a spec, the reference implementation, the test suite. And what the members do is they can collaborate on the expert group, they can contribute to the JSR, they can vote in the elections, and they can comment on everything as it's developed throughout the life cycle of a JSR. And every JSR follows the same life cycle, whether it's a platform specification or whether it's a standalone optional package. So things that go through the JCP are oftentimes the platform specifications themselves. So like Java SE 22 is a JSR, Java 23 is a JSR that's being developed through the program now. There's also optional packages. So has anyone heard of JSR 381, the visual recognition API for Java? A few of you have. So that's another JSR that was developed through the JCP, but it's led by a couple of individuals who are individual JCP members, and it's a standalone optional package built on top of Java SE. So the majority of the JSRs that are happening in the JCP right now are Java SE platform JSRs, but there are a few standalone optional packages, JSRs, that are developed. Yes, you have a question? It's related, and I'm going to get into that in 2 more slides. So I'll discuss how the JEPs work into it. So within the JCP, we have those 3 deliverables, the spec, the reference implementation, and the TCK. And those things really do all work together in concert. So essentially, the specification tells you if you can build an implementation. So the reference implementation is the proof of concept, essentially, and it should be thorough and complete. That's why you have the documentation. And many of you, even though you weren't familiar with the JCP, you have heard of a JSR, so you've referred to the specification at one point or another in time. And then the test suite ensures that different providers can create independent implementations of the specification. So that's what gives all of you as developers a choice in the implementation that you use. Maybe you may or may not make that decision depending on your role, but your company may make that decision for you. And so that way you have different implementations that are still compatible with each other. And as I mentioned, everything goes through the same development cycle. Everything's voted on by the executive committee and approved before it can be put into any code that's put into production. So you can test and do development against early access builds and early access versions of the work. But before it can be put into any shipping product or used in deployment, it has to be approved by the JCP executive committee. And associate members, which is a new level of membership for individuals, can also act as contributors on every JSR. So the JCP, as I mentioned, it's a standard, but also it's developed in open source. And in the JCP, it's a little bit unique in terms of how the technology is developed, but Java is unique in that we embrace open standards and open source. And we do that through work in OpenJDK, which there was a question earlier. So the reference implementation for the Java platform specification is developed collaboratively and released via open source license, and that's done in OpenJDK for the Java SE specifications. And the terms that are used in OpenJDK for projects is a Java enhancement proposal or a JEP. So in the JCP, the projects are called JSRs, and in OpenJDK, the projects are called JEPs, Java Enhancement Proposals. And how it currently works for a platform specification is there's a collection of JEPs, or Java Enhancement Proposals. The work is done in OpenJDK, and as the work gets further along, it's then targeted to a JSR, or a Platform Proposal specification, and the work of the JEPs gets rolled up into a JSR. So that's the correlation between the two things. So they're closely related but different in that usually with the Java SE 22 platform specification, there were maybe 15 different Java enhancement proposals. So since the time I was here before, when I was in Atlanta, when we had Java 9, at that time we would have maybe over 100 different JEPs that would go into a platform release. So I think for Java 9, there were over 100 different JEPs, but starting with Java 10 and up through Java 22, when we shifted to having a platform release of Java every 6 months, there's been on average maybe 7 to 15 Java enhancement proposals per platform specification. So while the releases are coming out more frequently, that's also one of the things that's driving innovation. When I mentioned at the beginning that the innovation pipeline is richer than it ever has been, that is to a large extent a result of this accelerated platform release cycle. So in other words, contributors are more likely to want to contribute to a project when they know that their work may actually be implemented within a few months versus having to wait 3 or 4 years for the next platform release. And then also as developers, it gives you an opportunity to try out some of those new features. So if you see that there's a new release of Java coming out, it's actually a digestible amount of content and new features that you can actually go in and start to learn some of these new features. So even if your company is not moving to the newest version of Java through this program, you have an opportunity to try out the early access builds every 2 weeks. You can test your applications against the early access builds, start to experiment with some of the new features that are going to be put into the next version of the platform. So every 2 weeks, you can go to jdk.java.net, and there you can try out the latest version of the Java platform. So just like I mentioned earlier, ready for use will be 22, but here you can get early access to 23. Also, some of the projects that are happening in OpenJDK have project-specific builds. So even though we're on this release cadence now of every 6 months, there's a new version of Java, and it has a number rather than we used to always say this version of Java is coming out of this project in OpenJDK. We still have all the projects in OpenJDK, and we just have things coming out of them as they're ready. They get integrated into a platform release. But some of the projects still do their own early access versions. So like with Loom, with Java 21, we had virtual threads. So that's a really significant and important project, and virtual threads came out of Loom, but Loom still exists as a project, and you can still get early access builds there. There's going to be even some new things coming out with this next release, and same for Valhalla. Okay. So as I mentioned already, we're working on Java 23. So this is a template that you can see for every JSR and platform specification. What I have here on the screen is just a screenshot. So we know that there will be a release in September. March 2024 was when we had Java 22. In September 2024, we'll have Java 23. So that's JSR 398. And then you can see here on the screenshot, there's a collection of the Java enhancement proposals that are targeted for Java 23. If you wanted to see what was in Java 22, you could just change the URL to 22, and it would bring up the same page, and then you would see what features went into 22, same thing for 21, and then all the way back to Java 10 when we started doing this template. So this template, moves over time. I took this today, but it'll tell you the schedule. We're gonna have the same schedule every time. It comes out in March, it comes out in September. Whatever is ready to be put into that release is what's in the release. And then, you could obviously click through to find out more news about each of the new Java enhancement proposals that are targeted for that release. So I mentioned the executive committee. This was our meeting that we had in New York back in September. We meet every other month. 2 times a year we meet face-to-face. That just puts some a picture to the names. In other words, there's 18 JCP executive committee members. We actually do have Java user group members who serve on the executive committee. We have 2 currently, so I don't know if that's something that the Atlanta JUG is interested in getting involved with, but just to give you an idea of who these folks are, when we meet, we take the attendance. We have associate members. Now our associate member on the executive committee is Ken Fogel. We have SoJava and the Japan Java user group as our user group members, and then the Eclipse Foundation. I mentioned open source groups that are part of the executive committee, and the balance of the executive committee is made up of companies that are invested in the future of Java. And they vote on JSRs, so in our most recent meeting, these were the JSRs that were up for vote and comment, including another standalone specification. So obviously I mentioned the majority of the work is the platform JSRs, which you can see there, Java 22, Java 23. We also had a ballot for units of measurement API, which is led by several individuals who are members of the JCP. Also, we talk about events like the anniversary, so the executive committee helps to guide us in that. I kind of made, when it went through already, the first kind of portion of my talk, which is what are the JCP and what do we do? So now, as far as what's up with the JCP, I'm sharing a few things that we've talked about recently. So we've been talking for a few months about what we're gonna do around the anniversary of the JCP. We created some commemorative items. Some of those are in the back that you can get on your way out. And we also created a cute Duke personality as the mascot, and had the opportunity for user groups around the world to create their own kits and celebrations, as well as talk about who we're going to award in the community for their work and some of the activities that they've done. We actually created a category for user groups, and they're participating in an initiative we call Java in Education, which I'm also going to talk to you about and see if anyone here is interested in participating. So the executive committee votes on our annual awards. These were the winners this year. And we do several events, one of which we did last month when we were here in Atlanta for DevNexus. So we talk about those in our meetings. We also talk about a couple of different initiatives that we've started recently, and one of them is Java in Education. Has anyone heard of Java in Education initiative? Okay, good. A couple of you have. So what we talked about in the executive committee, so obviously what we wanted to do is fill the demand in the industry for Java developers. When you look around, you often will see that Java developers have been using the technology for a long time. So we want to make sure that we really fuel that next generation of Java developers. So we bring students into our community activities and into the companies. So how can we help the community at large do that? Those are some of the things that we talked about, and what we decided was that it would really be nice to have our executive committee members as well as our Java user group members help us to bring local students to the technology. So not necessarily teach them how to use Java, but help them to really embrace the students and younger professionals and show them the activities and the ways that they can learn Java and how they can use it in their careers as they start into transitioning from academia to industry. And we do also some surveying of the educational community. So we spent a lot of time talking about this and talking about things that we could do to impact that. So we talked about the ecosystem, we talked about how it is to learn Java as a student, we talked about how is it for educators to teach Java versus how is it to teach maybe some other popular languages. And we brainstormed about ways that we can address this. And I think a really key one when you go to teach, high school students or even younger, which I've done oftentimes in my volunteer work, is that, a lot of the schools, especially here in the US, are providing Chromebooks, which you can't run Java on a Chromebook. So you end up having to bring machines and install things on machines, and you've basically eaten up all of your time doing the setup before you actually have a chance to teach any of these things. So it's some technical challenges. So in terms of looking at different technologies, and Ron Pressler presented on this at a last executive committee talking about, there's the technical challenge that Python has of scaling up, and with Java, our challenge and what we're trying to address with a couple of different Java enhancement proposals is, scaling down. So he calls that a smaller Java, and this is really for students and teaching students. And so what we want to do is create an environment where it's easier to have smaller projects that are early stage, and really make it easier for beginners to start to experiment with the technology. So you may have heard of this initiative and a post that Brian Getz made in OpenJDK, which was called Paving the On-Ramp. And so that whole idea behind that concept is that we want to make it easier for beginners to get on board with Java. And so to start with, what we did is within OpenJDK, there's several different JEPs that have been created to address this from a technology perspective. So while we're not doing this work in the JCP, so to speak, what we talked about in the last meeting was that these JEPs are happening in OpenJDK. Some of them have already been delivered, but not everybody hears about those things. So some of the work that you can do and you can help us with and that we're trying to do is communicate about some of these changes. And so we haven't developed material yet that really ties together these changes that are being made in Java. But once we do, we'll have another presentation that talks about that, because I'm going to tell you next about the presentations that we have developed. But these are some of the things that we're currently discussing and talking about. How can we share these things more broadly with the educational community? And obviously here in Atlanta, you have a rich educational community. So Java user group leaders and members can take advantage of the resources that we create and share your experiences here in your local community. And what we've done in our working group is we created these 4 resources. So if anyone in the room is interested in doing some outreach to students, basically on jcp.org, what we have available are these 4 presentations that you can take and deliver. They have full speaker notes, and then we also have some train the trainer videos, so you could reach out to your local schools and deliver these presentations. And one of them is really simple, and you really would not even need to be a developer to deliver this presentation, how and why to use to teach Java or to learn Java. So you can switch it either way. You could give it to educators, why should you teach Java? Or you can give it to students, why should you learn Java? And where is it used? And this, we try to appeal to students here by giving them examples of things that they're going to know of, right? Like Netflix or NASA, Minecraft, the things that they're going to get excited about in terms of where's it used. And then, there's a little bit more complex presentation, which is modern Java features. So this is really looking at Java and some of the innovations that have been put into the platform collectively from, say, Java 10 all the way up to Java 22. So taking a look at some of those features and putting it together into one presentation that shows students and educators that Java is a modern environment to program in. And even if you're only learning Java 8, because a lot of students now and in the college courses even are teaching to Java 8. So this is like a supplement to their courses. So even if they're learning Java 8, this workshop would show them that there's other things that are being used in industry. And additionally, I mentioned the JSR 381 visual recognition API. That's in machine learning and artificial intelligence for visual recognition. There's a workshop. So this was a workshop that was created by the specification lead of JSR 381. So it shows how you can use machine learning and artificial intelligence with Java. And when we delivered this presentation at one of the last EC meetings, the one before the New York meeting was in Singapore, and we delivered this workshop to some of the students in Singapore. And none of them could believe that you could use Java in artificial intelligence environment. They were shocked. They all said that you wouldn't be doing Java with that. So it's an educational eye-opener. And finally, and I would say this is one of the most impactful presentations that we also did in Singapore. There's a couple of examples of day in the life presentations, and this is really eye-opening for students because most students think that they're going to go into their first job and they're going to be coding all the time. And I have two examples, one from IBM employee and one from an Oracle employee, just talking about their day. And these were created independently, and also there's research that shows, but both of these presentations say, they're spending maybe 40% of their time coding and the rest of the time they're doing something else. And the students are not at all prepared for that. They're thinking they're going to go into an environment where they're going to be sitting at the desk and coding all day. So those types of presentations have gotten really great feedback from students as well as faculty, and you can kind of use those as a template if you wanted to and put your own role in there in terms of how you spend your time. What are the skills that are important for you in industry? So we have a monthly meetup where we talk about these things. Our next one is May 28th. We always meet on a Tuesday. It's one Tuesday a month, and we work on evolving the presentations. That's mostly done offline, but we discuss them, and then we talk about where people have shared them and try to write up some more examples. And our last one, we did a train the trainer of the presentation that was updated for Java 22. So if you'd like to join us, there's a groups.io list, and that's where I share the Zoom details. We do that over Zoom. And our next one is next week on Tuesday. Secondly, this is a newer topic that we started. So that kind of that's Java in education. That's an initiative we work in the JCP. Another one that we just started is the Java ecosystem working group. And this is really about third-party tools and libraries. So trying to help with adoption of the newer versions of Java. So all of our meetings are public on jcp.org, so you could read the summary of some of these discussions if you were interested. And we're just getting started on this topic, but really we're talking about, we've for a long time been talking about upgrading the platform versions to the newest versions. But what about all the third-party tools and libraries? What we found when we've had these discussions in the executive committee is that oftentimes this is really a dependency, I guess you could say, for migrating all the different tools and libraries that are used in the application stack. So what can we do to help to influence this ecosystem of third-party tools and libraries, which really is one of the greatest strengths of the ecosystem. But at the same time, for enterprises that want to migrate to new versions of the platform, oftentimes there's a lot of work to be done in helping these third-party tools and libraries to also migrate to the new version. So we started this working group, and it's really just getting started. Right back after we had Java 9, we had the Quality Outreach Program. Has anyone ever heard of the Quality Outreach Program? So we started this program within OpenJDK, which is volunteer-based for maintainers of projects free and open source projects that aren't backed by a corporation, which is the majority of them. And the idea with quality outreach was to try to get, all of these projects to test on the newest versions of the Java platform and to indicate when they were ready. And also, oftentimes people would use it as a way to find new contributors. And I would often coach people who were looking how to get involved in open source that this was a great resource because you can find here who's the maintainer. Sometimes they would list issues that need to be fixed to migrate to the next version. So it's a great way to find a project that maybe you would want to get involved with, and also a way for you to know if you have dependencies. Is it available on the current version, or where is it in this stage? But so far we were only talking about adopting new JDK versions. And what we found was that there's also this multi-release model that's well established for the lower part of the stack. So we started also thinking about, what about the libraries? How can we kind of coach and help the libraries to adopt a similar model to what we did that I described earlier, right? With moving to that model of the 6-month release cadence and things being there and ready and not backporting bugs, but only new features. So we started thinking about open source libraries, as we surveyed, seem to offer like a one-size-fits-all version to cover everything, right? But there's hidden costs with having a single version versus having the multiple branches, and it takes more resources to support the multiple branches. So once an application starts getting used in productions, you need to have a separate branch for development and testing. And one version is kind of serving them all for the library maintainers, and they can only use the features from the oldest release that they're supporting. So the question is, why can't we all just move to the latest version? And some people often will say, and even I was talking to somebody about this earlier today, well, couldn't we just have a migration tool? Wouldn't that just solve the problem? And actually, we don't think that would solve the problem, even though there are lots of migration tools that are out there. But we started to think about how could we try to influence corporate adoption of the JDK, because what also we found is that most of the time when a company wants to migrate to a new version of Java, the way they do it is upgrade now and upgrade everything in the stack to this new version, and it's the corporate mandate. You will be on Java 11 or you will be on Java 17, and then you take the whole stack and you migrate it, and then you find that you have hundreds or thousands of dependencies. We had Alibaba present at our meeting in Singapore, and it was thousands of dependencies that they were having as they moved from 8 to 11 and then 11 to 17. And what we found was that experience is pretty common. It wasn't a standalone incidence. So we said, well, that's really exhausting for developers and not a great experience, and not a great experience for the corporation as well doing that. So what if we could influence companies to think about a better form of adoption, so breaking up the stack? Why can't you have multiple versions of Java running in an enterprise? Maybe there's some parts that are more static and need stability versus needing new features. And maybe that would eliminate some of these dependencies that you have, because maybe by the time you get to them, you wouldn't even need that code anymore. And so that's one of the things that we talked about in our last meeting, which is only 2 weeks ago, and this presentation will be public on the website, after I write up the summary, and it's available because, like I said, everything's available on jcp.org. But this is a current discussion, and I think why I brought it up here is I think as you are working, obviously I want to hear your questions and comments, but maybe this is something that you can influence in your own organizations, right? Of just asking those questions. I mean, I think I had never thought of it myself until the product manager, brought this suggestion up, right? Like, how could this help when we look at solving this problem? Obviously, we can try to work with the maintainers of the tools and libraries, but also maybe as companies, there's things that we can do to try to influence those practices in corporate culture. Because obviously here, as user group members and leaders, you're you're active and seen as leaders, right? So bringing that knowledge and talking about some of these things in your own corporations, might also have an influence on this experience. So that's kind of looking at it from the corporate perspective. This last part that I'm going to cover is, because I'm on like 15 minutes left and I want to leave time for questions. Working with library maintainers, what we talked about in the last meeting as well is, we could try to share with maintainers the development processes and practices that the Java platform team themselves are using and what all the community is using in OpenJDK, and what that is called is tip and tail development. So has anyone heard of tip and tail development? Okay, yeah. So basically what we're trying to do is choosing, which baseline JDK are you going to base your project on? So rather than one size fits all and a single release train for everyone, you have one code base, and then you would have multiple versions. So kind of like the support model where we have different versions. So multiple release trains targeting different JDK versions does cost more, and maintaining old release trains is costly, and backporting a lot is also costly. So tip and tail really says that you're not going to backport new features. You're only going to put new features in the latest version. So you may offer an older version, but that's not going to have new features backported to it. If you want to use the new version, it's in the new one. Yeah, you only get the new features in the new version. Essentially, that's what it's saying. So what we found is when we talk to the maintainers is that they're typically not doing it this way. They're doing backporting of new features. What we talked about is there's really two classes of consumers for a maintainer, right? You have legacy and evolving. So your applications could be legacy, where I talked about earlier, right? You're valuing stability, and then you have evolving applications where those new features are really important, and you want those, whether it's performance or just convenience of the new features. So that creates this dichotomy between stability and new features. And that's what the challenge is for library maintainers. I think we summarized it and talked about it. But the tip and tail, if you use this method of development, what you do is you put new features and enhancement into the release train. You target a recent version of the platform, and most of the effort is made easier to add capabilities. And then security and fixes are only for those major catastrophes, not for new features and functionality. And that means the cost becomes lower. So essentially, if you're using tip and tail development as a library maintainer, it's going to cost you less in terms of time, because that's really where the costs come from if you're maintaining an open source library. For the most part, it's usually done by one single maintainer, even though we've talked about different ways that you can get involved. In the end, it really comes down to it's one person who's doing all the work, migrating that tool to the next version. So if they adopt this model of development, they're going to give their legacy users more stability, but they're going to give their evolving users the new features, and it's going to also be more fun and rewarding for them as maintainers of the project. But from the experience that I've had just over the last few months in talking to some library maintainers, it requires a really big mind shift for them, and it's something that they're reluctant to consider. So I think this is another opportunity for us as community leaders to really, talk to these people and try to influence them and educate them. So one of the things that we're going to do is have an informational JEP, which talks about tip and tail development, because I think really the first step is, educating people, what is this about? And, if you are involved in open source projects, talking with the maintainers about this mindset, I guess you could say, or development practice. So that's not available yet either. It will be soon, but I think that's another opportunity for the Atlanta Java user group to get involved, and that's why I wanted to share it with you today. We also are starting working groups for this item, so it's the Java Ecosystem Working Group, and what we're doing at this point is, just hearing from different maintainers about how they're doing things, corporate as well as open source, because companies do it differently. So like we'll hear from JetBrains. JetBrains been really great. If you use that IDE, you know that it's available as soon as the release is out for the platform version. And then also Eclipse Collections is going to share their experiences. Obviously, that's more of a volunteer-based effort. So before I take a few questions, leave you some pointers for how to find out more about the JCP, how to get involved, and take advantage of the public information that's available to you. And where you can find us is primarily on Twitter/X if you want to find out more about some of the work that I've talked about, and also our website, which is jcp.org, and there you can find all of the JSRs and all of the work of the executive committee, links to the Java in Education initiative with all the materials that I mentioned that are available, so the slides, the speaker notes, recordings of the videos, and then of course information about our annual executive committee elections, our annual awards, and how to join if you wanted to join us. Sure. That one? Okay, perfect. So I have time for a couple questions, and then I think we said we're not doing raffles, but I have a couple items that I brought with me. So my favorite questions is going to get, I have one bag, which is our anniversary, JCP 25-year anniversary. And then I recently wrote a book with Bruno Souza from the Brazilian Java User Group, which is a technical career book. And so I have one copy of that. So essentially, I wrote a book talking about getting involved in these types of activities and how it's going to help your career. So any questions that I can address? Yes?
Can one get involved doing documentation of this?
Yes, and actually when I do a presentation that is breaking it down 5 steps how to get involved, I didn't have time for it because I kind of decided to share a little bit of insight with you guys into some of the things that we're talking about, but I have 5 steps for how to get involved in an open source project or a standards related project, and one of them does say, third step, decide what you want to work on. And one of the most useful things is working on documentation. So documentation and communication. So things like writing up a blog or writing about experience or even social media, sharing, there's new early access build available or talking about experience with it. So there definitely is help needed around documentation. Yes.
Is there the effort in process or, running one JVM on multiple CPUs, specifically on the scaling side of these, cloud-based? Right now, we are dependent on the cloud solution. We don't have anything specific into the JVM.
Please repeat the question.
I'm not sure. I don't think I have the answer to that question.
I want to run my JVM so that it can scale up based on the hardware. So right now, I have to scale up. I have to copy the JVM. I want to have one JVM which can scale up to whatever hardware I have, so that I don't have to wait for the network or downtime. Is there any?
I'm not sure about which project that would be. Do you know? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So you're asking if the JVM can scale up depending on the hardware.
Yeah.
Well, when you install the JVM on a machine, say with 8 cores and 16 gigs of RAM, it will use all of that unless you tell it not to.
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about the, let's say, the GCP provides me, let's say,
On
20
GCP,
machines,
yeah.
and I can use all those machines with one single JVM.
Yeah, you just deploy a Docker container and use.
No, I don't
Kubernetes.
want to use any other technology. I want to have within the JDK.
Yeah, what you want to use is Google Cloud Run.
Something like that.
You want to use Google Cloud Run. You basically give it a jar file or Google Cloud Functions, and it will scale up and down the number of virtual servers that are there to use more resources depending on load. So that's what you would do with that. Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
How do I convince my sons, young adults, that Java is still cool? It's fun?
Okay, so the question is, and this is a great question. Thank you, Tommy. How can I convince my children that Java is the cool, sexy language to use and not that bullshit called JavaScript?
Right. Well, I think, that one presentation that I mentioned is, why should I learn Java? So we try to address that there. And I think the way we did it is through some of the things I talked about, which is, where it's used. So the apps that they're going to recognize that they're using are built on Java. So, examples like that, like NASA, depending on what their interests are, like NASA, Minecraft, if they like to play that game. That if they're older teenagers that have a phone, they're going to know that, the social media applications they use are, that's built with Java, things like that. So
yeah, actually, let me, if you don't mind, let me follow up on that question.
Okay.
So you may not know this, but there's a gaming company called Supercell. Okay, all their backend stuff is written in Java, for example. So that's a great example. Chess.com, which everyone knows what chess is.
Yeah.
And you can guess what chess.com is. They are also, all their backend stuff is written on Java. Okay? And then on top of that, when you build Android applications, of course, that's Java, right? Well, Kotlin or Java, same thing.
Minecraft.
Right. And then Minecraft, unbelievably, is also completely, the front end and the back end is also written in Java. So there's loads of examples like this to help motivate your kids to say, hey, it's, the web stuff, and I'm not really hating on JavaScript, even though I am a little bit. There's lots of different things that are written in Java, and actually a lot of the let's say the top 100 startups that went public or sold for a shitload of money in the last decade, a lot of them were also written in Java. So if your children like money, that's also a good way to go. So I know mommy and daddy like money, but sometimes children do too. So yeah, go ahead, Laura.
And if you're looking for something a little more hands-on that they can get in now, First Robotics runs high school programs across the country. Their robots are coded in Java.
Yeah, that's in the presentation too. Good point. Yeah. Lego. All kids know Lego. Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation tonight. My question is regarding to the materials you mentioned. There are 4 presentation. Some of them I'm myself very interested. Where do I find them?
Yeah, when you go to find the materials that I talked about, I think you're talking about the Java and education materials, right? Okay, yeah. So if you go to jcp.org, there's a section that says Java and education, and if you just click on Java and education, the 2 most popular presentations are there, but if you want to find all of them, there's a wiki page on GitHub, our GitHub organization, and there's some short videos as well, of different experts talking about their experience, but then, all the materials are here. So including the JSR 381 presentation, that's the machine learning and artificial intelligence, and then a couple of those day in the life presentations. And then, the first one is where to use Java. So this is the one that's the new features. So it talks about some of the new features, language enhancements, some of the things, that's just a preview of it. And then the next one down is that, where is it used kind of presentation. Oh, that's the same one. So, okay. This one here. And a lot of these are available in Spanish too. So, where is it used? So showing the Mars rover, Wikipedia, Minecraft, some of those use cases. As well as where it's used and how much you get paid for it. So depending on the age of the student, you would just adapt. And then on a later slide, there's more of the apps that students might recognize that's use Java to build these things. I think Lego's there, and some of the apps that people use like Uber and Netflix and LinkedIn, those kind of things. So yeah, it's all there. And then there's also a link if you wanted to join the mailing list and participate in the meetings, you would just do that here. You would join the groups.io. So there's some discussion on the list, but mostly it's just sending out the invites for their next discussion.
So continuing on the kids learning, so my kids still goes to elementary school and they're already learning programming. So the way they teach in the school is how do the rabbit gets its treat? So they just join the blocks, learning the if-else logic, things like that. So are there any resources specific to Java which can tailor to younger kids like that? Because
well,
I already
we also
know all those if-else, for those looping and things like that.
Well, there's links to the Greenfoot and Alice projects. So those are some like kind of GUI like especially Alice is more like a storytelling app or platform that you can just do it on the website. So I think Alice is probably the closest one to that. It would be alice.org. And we talk about it a little bit on the wiki. There's some materials and workshops that are there.
As a college student, how would I get the Java in Education program in contact with my school to do stuff there?
Well, depending on your school, so since you already know your professor, right, you could say, yeah, have a volunteer here. So basically, you could either show them the website and say there's these workshops available that you could deliver, or you could say, I can find a volunteer like one of you here that could come and deliver the presentation for the class. Yeah. Or like your dad, for instance.
It's exciting to see you and to meet you in person. Thank you very much for the talk. My question is not related directly to JCP.
Okay.
I'm personally bullish on AI-based tools for developers in general, and I would love to know your opinion on that. And should we be worried that all our jobs will be taken?
Well, that's almost the number one question I get from students. Well, why am I even studying this? Because my job's going to be taken. It's more of a statement than a question. But I think that it's great to learn and experiment with artificial intelligence and some of the solutions that are out there. But I don't think our jobs are going away anytime soon, because obviously, especially right now, most of it's wrong. And if it isn't wrong, it's very inelegant in terms of the solutions. And how would you know that if you didn't already understand what was happening? You would have no way to evaluate that. So I don't think that that's going away anytime soon. And I think your skills are going to be valuable. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's important to study and learn, what are some of the tools out there and how could you incorporate it? So one of the things that I've seen a lot of times technical professionals do is just be able to survey the tools and how they work and note like how well does it work and how would it work. And these are some of the ways that we could incorporate this into our work that we're doing here in the company, and maybe help to make things more efficient, and maybe even potentially create more time for you to do things that you enjoy. So automate some of the things you don't enjoy, but create more time to do some of the more things that are valuable for you in your career.
So just to back that up, so I'm not an engineer, but my use case with these tools is I write copy for press releases and newsletters and emails and stuff like that. And I put these prompts in, the prompt engineer, and software engineers do the same thing. And I get an output which is probably 70% of the way there. And out of that 70%, I might use 60%. Okay. Now the reason it helps me is because I don't have to do a bunch of work. Okay. I can edit what I see. But in the context of writing that copy, I know what I want. So I consider myself an expert on what the output's going to be. So I know when I see what is wrong. Okay, I think that, and all the software engineers I know that use these tools say exactly the same thing.
Right, so do you know who Mark Andreessen is? It's the guy who founded Netscape and a bunch of other companies. So he recently did a podcast. I don't remember which podcast it is, but if you look it up, it was within the last 2 weeks. And what he said that about AI and like it taking specifically software development jobs. Have you seen this thing yet? Okay, it's pretty cool. You should check it out. What he said is that with AI, what will happen is the demand for really good software engineers will actually go up instead of down. Now that sounds antithetical, but the reason for that is because software has always been an arms race, right? So if you're UPS and FedEx, the company that has better software is going to be more efficient and will be able to do better in the marketplace, in the business world. And so a natural extension of that kind of competition is a company like UPS or FedEx, or whether it's Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, or Home Depot or Lowe's or whoever, the company that has better software engineers that are able to utilize artificial intelligence to do much more and provide more advanced features will actually be much more in demand in the future. So software development, after we get down from this gulf that we're in right now, kind of at the bottom in terms of hiring for software engineers, but kind of nearing peak AI in terms of its hype, right? So once those two lines intersect in the future, what's going to happen is that those developers who are familiar with AI know how to use tools like Lang4Chain. If you're not familiar with Lang4Chain, it's a library in Java for using these generative AI LLMs. So the ability to be able to use AI to do more, deliver more complex features faster will actually make the demand for software developers go up over time. Not necessarily right now, but over time. But you should check out that interview. It's not me saying it. It's actually Mark Andreessen, a billionaire, founded a bunch of companies, founded Netscape 25 years ago, 27 years ago, whatever. Okay?
Yeah, and actually, so you might experiment too with the JSR 381. There's a few different implementations of that, the visual recognition for Java, and also within OpenJDK, there's Project Babylon, which is addressing artificial intelligence. So check that out, and become an expert in the Java arena around AI.
Yeah, my question is about JSR 381, and I was browsing the source code. So I've been, dabbling around with AI, and every time I look at the programming activity, not using the AI, but implementing the AI. Python is up there. They use NumPy, they use CUDA libraries, they make it fast. Now I was looking at the JSR code. I'm not able to understand how does it work internally. Does it use CPU, or does it use, if I have a media card, use the CUDA libraries, or do I need to go to some hoops and loops to make it faster and use the CUDA libraries? So Python has it built in because it uses the C libraries that are implemented, but Java has to be able to provide bridge that gap. So where are we on that?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I would have to ask Frank. Okay, because if you follow up with me, though, I can get you in touch with Frank, but go ahead.
JSR 381 does use CUDA currently, which allows you to use NVIDIA and AMD graphics processors. Sorry, I almost backed into you, Ken.
Get in the camera. He wants you in the camera.
Yeah, I don't want to okay. But there's a newer version of the CUDA library that JSR 381 hooks into that NVIDIA is promoting to use over the older CUDA chipsets. The short answer is that it uses JNI to be able to access the GPU directly to be able to do that. Okay. Now there's a little bit of a longer answer here in terms of JSR 381 and how Java fits into the ecosystem. Specifically, you mentioned NumPy and Scikit and those things which are in Python. Okay. I actually have a presentation on using Kotlin, which isn't Java, but runs on the JVM, as you know, to be able. They're essentially quarterly libraries to NumPy for Kotlin that allow you to do data science very, very close to the expressiveness of using Python to be able to do those kinds of things. So if you'd like to see that presentation next month, I gave it at a conference recently. Do we have a session next month on deck? I have to check if I'm actually here. I take the whole summer off. I'm just joking. So if I'm here next month, maybe we can line that up if folks are interested in that. Okay.
Sounds like people are interested in that topic, so that would be a good one.
And you know what? Maybe we should get someone to do a presentation on Lang4Chain next month. Who here wants to spend 4 weeks researching that and put together a presentation on it? How about we volunteer a college student in the audience to do that? You up for that?
He just put his mask.
I'm just kidding. I won't put you on the spot. Okay. But if somebody in the room wants to volunteer, just email us at info@ajug.org for like a Lang4Chain presentation. That's something we actually do want to carry sometime in the near future, since AI is such a hot topic right now. More questions?
Yes.
So AMD uses OpenGL and NVIDIA uses CUDA.
Yeah.
So does it automatically detect once it's OpenGL or NVIDIA?
I do not know the question, the answer to that question off the top of my head, because I just have a rack of NVIDIA 4080s at home to do all this. I'm just kidding. I do everything on the cloud like everybody else. And to be honest with you, unless you already have a high-performance NVIDIA card like a 3080 or a 4080 or a higher video card, it's actually cheaper just to go to, for example, go to Google and use their Tensor API, because that way you don't have to spend $2,000 to buy a video card. You can just run some models for like an hour or two and pay like, I don't know, $5 or something like that. So.
Okay.
More questions? We'll wrap up. All right, so we do have a meeting next month. What day is it on, Vince?
The third Tuesday.
It's on the third Tuesday, according to Vincent. So please come for that. I don't know if I'm going to be here, so I don't know if I can do that Kotlin data science talk next month or the month after. But for those of you who ask questions, please come up to the front.
Oh yeah, I'll pick my favorite.
We also have some crazy T-shirts. You may have seen some people wearing this today. What else we have?
DevNexus T-shirts. In the back, there's keychains and stickers.
There's also pizza, which you must
and
take.
pizza. Don't forget the pizza.
Otherwise, Vince will eat it all, and then we'll have to take him to the hospital tomorrow. Okay. So, all right. Thank you for coming.
All right.
Thank you. See you next month.
All right. Thank you.